Hello and welcome to another Wolftime gaming video. I've been really excited to get to this one. It's the Rebel Pathfinders for Star Wars Legion. Absolutely amazing sculpts. I love the fact that you've got a couple of non-human figures in here as well. It's a great film, and all these are based essentially on someone from the film as well, which I think is absolutely fantastic touch. Before we get started on painting them though, as usual, let's get that kettle on. As usual, the first stage in painting any sort of miniatures is a base coat. Today I've used Games Workshop's Wraithbone spray. It's the one to use with the contrast paints, because I want to try and use a few contrasts to speed up my painting on these ones as well. The eagle-eyed amongst you will notice I haven't put any basing material on that, and that's because I'm doing something a little bit different because of the theme I'm going for with these. So let's get started. So the first thing I always do when painting any of these miniatures is the eyes, and the first stage of doing the eyes is a small black line from the middle of the nose out to the edge of the eye, and also at this stage I do the mouths as well. I darken those down, only if they've got the mouths open slightly. I don't do it if the mouths are closed, obviously, because that would be insane. So you can see that it's quite a simple process. The next stage in doing the eyes is using a white, and I follow exactly the same process, drawing a line from the middle of the eye outwards. Obviously in this instance I'll do it inside the dark area, so essentially you're getting that dark surround around the eye, which makes the eye pop out the rest of the model. The final stage of doing an eye is just a dot in the direction the model's looking. Usually I do these just forward because it's easy, so all you need to do in that instance is do the middle. Don't make it a dot so you can see around that, always do it so it touches the top and bottom. So the next stage in painting these models is the skin. I've actually started with this lieutenant here. I can't remember his name, I'll have to look it up afterwards, but essentially he's got a darker skin. So what I've done is gone with a contrast wildwood in this instance to do his actual skin, and I've done the hands and around the face. It's a really good colour to actually match his skin pigment as well, which is fantastic. The light skin guys are all done with a Gulliman flesh, another contrast paint. Just taking my time around these really. Some of them are wearing gloves as well, so obviously I don't do all the hands, just the ones that haven't got gloves on, because again it'd look a bit weird. But there's 3 of these that need the Gulliman flesh essentially, and it's just taking the time around each one of these models, and because the contrast paint's so good as it drops into the recesses, you don't need to do any highlighting as well, which I love, because it really speeds things up and makes me get these models on the tabletop as quick as possible. Now with this guy's a little bit different, so I actually got a couple of reference images from him, but I noticed he's got like a flesh sort of coloured skin as well, even though most of it's covered in fur and hair. So I actually picked out a few of those areas with the flesh sort of colour, and then went in straight over the top of that with like his beard and around his ears, and he's got 2 like spiky head bits, and I picked those out with another contrast paint, and that one is Skeleton Horde, which is a paint I've been using a lot lately, and it's perfect for that sort of lighter, almost a Xandridus sort of a colour, but not quite as dark. The rest of his hair was then done with a contrast wildwood, and he started to look really effective at this point. I started to get really quite excited about this guy, especially because I'm so fed up of painting humans. It was something very different. Then you've got the lizardy sort of guy, Corporal Pow, I think his name is, out the film. And to start off, I've used Castellan Green, another Games Workshop paint there, just as a base coat for his skin. He's got quite a dark skin, but with lots of sort of light patches as well. And just around his hands, I've picked the detail because he's got essentially fingerless gloves. I noticed on some of the reference images, else I wouldn't have noticed and just painted it completely as the gloves. To highlight his skin, because it's not a contrast paint, I've actually gone in with Deathworld Forest, which is a very light green in comparison, but it really does pick out the raised areas really nicely. Now I've just dry brushed this on essentially, which all you need to do is get a little bit of paint on the brush, wipe off the majority, and then dry brush it straight on there, and you get that sort of effect where it just picks out the tops. The next stage was the weapons I decided to go with, and I went with the contrast black Templar for this. It's quite a decent black, and as you can see, it actually leaves all the raised areas a really light colour as well. So it's ideal for painting weapons and things, especially the Star Wars ones, because there's lots of like highlights on the Star Wars weapons and silvers and things, and this works really well in that instance, and you can really get a decent effect. If you wanted to go a little bit darker, just go a bit heavier, maybe do a second coat if you wanted to do that. At this stage I thought it was a good idea to pick out the hair on a couple of models before I moved on to the actual clothing itself. In this instance I started with the one female model you get, or one human female. I don't know whether the others are female or male, the non-human figures, but essentially I've just done the blonde sort of a colour, because if you look in the reference images, there's a girl who looks exactly like this in the film, who's got that like blonde sort of colour, and I've just done that with Xandra Dust. I then went on to actual clothing, and in all the reference images I've looked at for the soldiers out of Rogue One, most of them have got this sort of lighter coloured shirt, and I've done that with contrast skeleton horde again. So I'm using the same paint that I did previously, so it's great because you're not spending loads of money on all these different shades when they all essentially work, and contrasts are really good to do that as well, because you can go on heavier or go into it again with second coats and things and change that colour even more, and so you essentially just paying for one pot of paint, which is great. But yeah, all the shirts and things are all that sort of lighter colour I noticed, specifically on all the models apart from the big guy with the big heavy weapon. He's not got one that sort of a colour. Some of them have got like body warmers, like sort of tactical vests on as well. But I've gone into these with a different colour that we'll get onto in a minute. But underneath all of those, essentially this sort of tan colour, which is great for contrast skeleton horde. Now you can see I'm going into the tactical vests now, and all these are sort of a dark colour. I think Sergeant Melchi has got actually a dark brown rather than a black, but I went with black for all of these, just so they all look the same on the table. I know it's not quite screen accurate, but I think it works quite well. I also did around the helmets at this point as well, exactly the same paint, just around the edges of them, because you've got that same sort of a colour there with the tan and the black, and this works really well. And you can see straight away, as soon as I'm going on to the lieutenant there, it brings out the details really nicely. So we're moving on to the trousers for the sergeant here. I've done that with a contrast wildwood again, and I've just gone into the trousers, and I've done that with all the models as well. I've used that contrast wildwood for the trousers because I think it's a really good colour, but I've gone into it light compared to the skin on the lieutenant, because I wanted him to I wanted these shades to be different, obviously. But the trousers look really nice, and you can see that they're so detailed, these models are, that you're getting that raised area straight away, which is a lot lighter, and it's looking really good. Corporal Pow's got his mouth wide open, so I've used Screamer Pink just on his tongue there, just to highlight that really. It did take a little bit of time to get that. I do apologise, because at this point I've noticed that the camera's cut out at some point and we've lost a little bit, so just to let you know, I use Stegadon Scale Green just on the jacket there. I watered it down with a little bit of medium, so you've got the same sort of effect as the contrast paint, and a lot of the raised areas were a lot lighter. I also picked out at this stage the yellow patch that's on their tactical vest, just on the right shoulder, or just below the right shoulder. They've all got that in the film, so I really wanted to stick with that for to try and stay a little bit screen accurate. I picked out the beard on this guy. I wasn't sure what direction to go in with the colour of his beard, but I've just gone with a black contrast black Templar, because there is a guy who's wearing very similar sort of clothing in the film to this, who's got sort of a black and grey beard, and it works quite well. I also used Black Templar just in the goggles as well on the lenses. I did think about going for quite a lighter colour to these, because I was going to go down the route I've gone with other models I've done in the past. However, when I actually looked at the photos of him, they are quite dark, almost shaded, so I've gone with that sort of a colour. I then went back to Castellan Green on some of the belts and things, because I noticed in the film some of them have got like a greeny sort of a tinge, and this was an ideal sort of colour to actually go with these, because it's a very sort of military webbing sort of style colour that they would have used in the films, so I thought it was great to actually try and stick as close to screen accurate as we could. I picked out quite a lot of the belts and things on all the models with this sort of a colour, and around the chin strap of the helmet as well, because it was like a perfect colour to pick that out. It's not great because it's not a contrast paint. It's going back to using the old style paints, but it worked quite well, I think. So this guy's wearing something very different from everyone else, almost like a flight suit. It's a very green, sort of browny sort of colour in the film. So I've gone with this Castellan Green again, and what I do with this is stick on a Agrax Earth shade over the top, so give it some brown sort of tinges in a bit. Obviously we're not at that stage right now, but at this point I just went over the top of it with the Castellan Green, the whole thing essentially. I actually quite like the way the white looked, and I might have to grab another one of these guys and make it a white, very spacesuity. But because I actually went quite neat around all his belts and his patches and things, the white actually stood out really nicely, so I might actually have to go back to that. Just to highlight that, again I've used Deathworld Forest, exactly the same paint I used on the skin of Corporal Power earlier on, but it's great for highlighting this colour. It's a really good lighter colour compared to the Castellan Green, so it looks really nice. And I just did this in dry brushing again, just picking out those raised areas around the model. I moved on to silver now, and I picked out a few of the buckles and things. There are a few around the models on the backs. They've got 3 on the shoulders. They've got one in the middle of the sort of midriff around the belly button area. And also at this point I picked out some of the silver bits on the weapons as well, because a lot of them weapons are worn in Star Wars. If you look at any of the black sort of weapons, they've all got this silver on them where the black's sort of worn away. So I thought it was a great point to do this as well. So I picked all those bits. Just on this guy as well, because he's wearing this sort of flight suit, he's got a bit around his neck where his helmet is attached, so that's silver in the films, and also around his wrists as well, so where the gloves would attach. So I've gone with silver for all these areas as well. He's a little bit bright, and you do think when it first goes on, oh, that's a little bit too shiny, but you add a little bit of null to it, and it darkens it right down and looks really good afterwards. You see here, these are the buckles I was talking about on the rear now. It's just where I picked out the silver and on the middle. All the models have got a little bit of metal on the actual belts and webbing and things. So it's good to just take your time looking around the model, because you will tell once they're completely painted if you've stuck with the clothing colour. They do stand out a little bit as well. So at this point we've gone on to the shade in those areas, and as I said, I used Nuln Oil, or was planning to use Nuln Oil, but at this stage I'm actually doing it. I've done it on all the silver bits that I picked out. Also I've done it around Corporal Pow's mouth, just so the teeth have a little bit of shading on them, because they were still the base coat. And it just darkens them down a little bit and puts a little bit of darkness in between each one, so they all stand out quite nicely. And I've also gone around all those bits and pieces where we said the helmet attached and the wrists attached and things like that on the other models, and also going over the weapons as well, just to darken down any of those silver bits that look a little bit too bright, because you will probably do that as the same way as I have as well. And then we moved on to straight onto Agrax Earthshade, picking out all the browns areas. So actually I've gone over the top of the Skeleton Horde as well, because it was a little bit light and I wanted to darken it down a little bit more, or at least make it look a little bit dirty, which this is great at doing. And straight around the bigger guy as well, on all that green, because it gives it a really nice browny dirty sort of a tinge. Then moved on to basing, as a base colour for the base I used Xandri Dust, just to completely coat the base, because what I'm going to do is put a little bit of fine sand on here, but if anything knocks off, I didn't want to see the white paint underneath essentially. I did think about going with black, but then if it knocks off you'd just see the black underneath, and again it wouldn't look right. And these are essentially fighting on Scarif, so I wanted them to look a little bit like sand, so we're going straight on it with a really fine sand that I managed to pick up from eBay, I think it was, where I grabbed it from, and it's just a little bag of sand essentially that I've mixed in a box with some thicker sand. Just around the edge of the bases, as with all the models I ever paint, I've gone with a black edging, just because I think it frames it really nicely. I used Corvus Black for this. You can see I needed to do 2 coats on this one as well, just to really darken it down, because it does look very streaky if you only do the 1 coat. 2 coats does it nicely. I added a few little rocks that I picked up onto the base as well at this point. I've just used a little bit of super glue and just put the rocks straight on there. I'm not painting the rocks at all. I'm sticking with their natural sort of a colour. A lot of people would, say this is sacrilege, but actually when you mix it with this base sand, with this fine sand, they stand out really nicely, and you don't need to. I wouldn't have got anything extra out of painting them. All I would have done is actually spent more time giving them a base coat, putting a base layer on, and then highlighting them, and there's no real need to do that. So all this is how I've done it. I've used just a little plastic tub, a little bit of PVA glue, dip it in there, then I get an older brush and I brush off all the sand that may be stuck to their boots and things around the bottom, because that's the last thing you want, is to have bits of sand stuck to your model, because it looks a bit pants. I then got a little bit of grass tufts I've got, and I've also got a little bit of foliage as well. I've just stuck that around the bases. So that's it, models complete. They look absolutely amazing. I've tried to stay as close to the screen accurate as I could, and I think I've pretty much got there with everything. It's not 100%, but I think they're absolutely amazing, and I really can't wait to get these on the table. I think they look great as a squad, because they're all they're basically the same sort of colours. Sticking with the same sort of colour palette really helps you get that effect. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I really do hope it's helping you with your painting as well. Make sure you subscribe, because I've got loads and loads of videos upcoming, lots of different Star Wars bits, a little bit of Warhammer 40k, a few bits of fantasy that I've been playing with recently, mainly Frostgrave. But yeah, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.